Hey, what's up, guys? Coach Mac, playfastfootball.blogspot.com. Today we're going to talk about building formations. I just recently spoke at 2 Glacier clinics in Atlanta and in Tampa, and one of the topics was tempo on offense. And when I speak about tempo on offense, one of the things that I always talk about that comes up is trying to get your verbiage or eliminating as much verbiage as possible so that you can get into 1 or 2 word play calls with a lot of the things that you're doing. And what we like to do in our run game is we like to get it to 1 to 2 play calls, which is or 1 to 2 word calls with some things packaged in, which gets it down to less signals, which gets it down to quicker communication. So when your verbiage starts to get up, then for each word that you have or each tag that you have, you probably have to give some type of hand signal, and for every hand signal, that's one more form of communication that has to go into the players, which slows down the tempo. So what I thought I'd talk about today is how I build some of my formations, which is unique to us probably and different than the way a lot of people would view some of the things that they do. But when you're building formations on offense, as long as it makes sense to you and you can teach it to your kids, it really doesn't matter how you do it or what you call it. So you're trying to build some form of consistency in there that gives your kids something easy to understand, and it doesn't have to be the same as everybody else as long as it builds in to your offense the way you want it to build in. So what I've got up here right now is a traditional pro-right formation that everybody would probably agree, all right, that this is pro-right 2-back set right now because we're in the gun, because we're a shotgun team. Right now these backs are split. So you could get into pro-right strong, pro-right weak, pro-right near, pro-right far, all the traditional ways of calling your backfield sets if you were an under-center team or even a shotgun team to get those backs in the backfield to line up. But as far as the verbiage for us is concerned, if it was a pro-right formation for us, I'd play with a strong guard, a strong tackle, a quick guard, and a quick tackle. And those players are going to switch sides. So my strong side players are always going to be on what I declare is the strong side of the formation. And although they have to flop around the ball, it's not a long way for them to go, but you know that will potentially slow you down a little bit within your tempo. So I have to understand the things that I want to teach or the things that I want to get done with my players that slow me down a little bit, and then I have to understand where I need to make up my time in order to get us to play at the right tempo. So for us, we're always going to switch our strong side guys, all right, and our quick side guys. And then our receivers are going to have to know based on formation whether they go to the call or away from the call. Our X is going to go away from the call 95% of the time. Our Y goes to every formation that we have, and the offense was built that way around when we used to have a tight end. Even though I don't play with a tight end anymore, when I did play with a tight end and when I played in offenses, everything was built around the tight end. And then as a receiver, you kind of had to understand where you needed to be within formations. But what happens for us is because I flip sides with my offensive line, I have to understand what I'm calling certain formations to understand where my linemen are going to go. So the easiest answer I can give you or explanation to that is if I were to take the Z and I were to put him over here, most people, generically speaking, would look at this formation and they would say that formation is twins left because the Twins receivers are on the left-hand side. And I am not going to disagree with that, but for me, I cannot call this formation twins left because this declaration would send my strong side players to the left. So when I am building my offense, I have to find another way to call that kind of formation or that type of formation because it is going to flop some of my people around. So for me, this to me, the easiest way that the kids understand it is if I were to say right twins. So now when I do that, all right, I can say right for my offensive line and my Y, and I can say twins for my receivers. So that the easiest way to look at that formation is right twins. So that you give the declaration first, and then you tell the twins that they're always going to be away in twins formation, they will always be away from the strength declaration. So really, in essence, I've only moved one player in that formation. So the Z is the only player out of the 11 players on the team. I went from right pro, or what most people would call pro right. I went from right pro to right twins, and I only moved one player. If I were to call this formation twins left, number one, I would have a hard time doing that with my offensive linemen because they would switch sides. And I would end up with the tight end and the strong side guys wanting to go over there. So I wouldn't be able to call that formation twins left. All right, so I have to call it a different way. But when I would talk to people a lot of times when they talk about formations, if you were to say to your tight end that he goes to the pro call, but he's got to go away from the tight end call, or you were to tell your Z that he has to go away from the tight end call in twins, eventually what you're going to get to is where you're going to find out that you are actually moving more people just to make the picture look right. So what I'm trying to say is, for me, when I go to this formation and I just say right twins, now the Z is the only person who needs to know that he lines up on the opposite side. Because in a normal formation, like I said, if I were to draw up pro right again, well, right now my tight end and my Z go to the pro call. When I draw up twins left, now I'm going to have a rule for my tight end, so my Z receiver is going to go to the twins call, but my Y would go away from the call. All right, so what I'm always looking for is the most convenient way to move people with only having a few players on the field that have to know what to do. So for me, just bringing the Z over here and giving him a twins call tells me that my right side of the formation, the strength is on the right, and the twins would be away. All right, so when I used to call my formations, I would teach them this way and I would call them that way. All right, and I would say twins right, and my receivers would know that twins always meant go away from strength, and my offensive lineman and my Y knew that they always went to the call. What we then progressed to, because it was hard for a lot of coaches that would come in and work when I had to teach coaches the offense, I started to progress this to where, all right, I'm okay with saying right twins if it makes it easier for everybody for me to give the declaration of the strength first, and then give the twins to let the receivers know that they are in a twin set. So sometimes you've just got to kind of switch things around so people can picture it a little bit better and say, all right, if you're not good with me saying twins right because twins right to you means that the twins receivers are on the right, which most people look at it that way, then I won't say twins right. I'll say right twins. So now that means the strength is right, but the twins need to go opposite the strength. And again, it's all a matter of how you teach it. Once you teach a formation, and once you get your kids to line up within that formation, they will understand what formations are, and they will understand, as long as you have rules and you don't stray away from those rules, once you teach it that way, the kids will understand it. So what I try and do is I try and make it as easy for the kids and the coaches to understand, because I know what I'm trying to accomplish. I know why I can't call that formation twins left. When I try to explain to people why I can't call that formation twins left, there are some people who question it a little bit, and they say, well, everybody else calls it twins left. Well, the way I use my offensive line and the way I tell my why, I can't call that formation twins left. All right, so I had to understand that I have to build it around the way I want to do it, and then it's my job to make it easier for all the people that I'm teaching it to give them some type of rules or some type of understanding, or call it different, so that if I have to say right twins instead of twins right because people understand it better, I'm okay with that because I know what I'm trying to accomplish. So where this really started to help us is when we went into our tempo sets and we went 2 by 2. So we went 2 by 2 and we went into tempo sets. For us, okay, this is what I call Frisco. So this would be Frisco right. So the Y and the Z, along with the strong side people, would go to the declaration. The X and the H go away, with my quick side lineman also going away. So that is what I would start as in Frisco right. Now, when we go into our tempo stuff, we just tag it NASCAR. And now NASCAR tells everybody that we are going to be in that formation, but we're going to be in that formation with a right side strength all the time. So Frisco right and Frisco left, if I jump back for a second, I could put the tail back here, and if I wanted to, I could take this formation and I could flip it and make it Frisco left. Now, if I made it Frisco left, then obviously all these things would change. Okay, so if I made it Frisco left, the strong side people would come over here, the quick side people would come here. That would be the H and the X, that would be the Z and a Y. And a lot of people ask with balanced formations like that, if it's even or doubles, why not just keep them all on the same side? Well, when I go to my tempo stuff, what I'm going to show you is how me building my formations with my linemen and with my nomenclature and verbiage, how that led us to be able to run some plays and give them the same tags. So, I would go to a set that I call NASCAR, and NASCAR equaled Frisco right. So when I talked to my players, I told them, listen, when we go to NASCAR, it's going to be an up-tempo deal. All right, I think everybody in the country knows when you say NASCAR, there's really no surprise anymore with what you're trying to do. Tony Franklin's system used it. A lot of people use it in their tempo deal because NASCAR racing, you think of high speeds, you think of high, the tempo and the pace of the race. Guys going 200 miles an hour. There's no surprise what NASCAR is to anybody anymore. NASCAR to me meant Frisco right, and I always line my tail back up on the strong side as a sniffer. All right? So, for argument's sake, one of the mainstays for us used to be we would bring this H in motion here, and we would run the power read play. And then we would also run Q counter away from that. Okay? So, when we built those things in, we were able to use one word to call that play, and we were able to use one word to call that play. We never had to use a motion tag. We never had to use a separate signal for motion. And we never had to change what we called the play because power read always went strong and Q counter always went weak. So my quick guard was always the puller on power so that I could really define his skills on a skip, pull, on a power play up to a play side inside linebacker. And then when I ran Q counter, my strong guard was always a flat kick out pull. So what I was also able to do was I was able to eliminate verbiage, but at the same time I was also able to kind of define a skill set for certain players, barring injury. Now you got to teach all your kids because in high school, if you get an injury, your next best lineman's going to go in and you don't know if that's a strong guard, a weak guard, or a quick guard, or a tackle. So we teach all the kids the skills. When it comes to refining a certain skill, our quick side guard would really refine the skill of skip pulling on the power play. Our strong side guard would really refine the skill of flat pulling to kick out on a counter play because we always ran the plays that way. We always ran power strong. We always ran counter to the quick or weak side. And people would ask me, well, does that mean it always goes right or it always goes left? No, it always goes strong. My players, when they're in a formation, they understand where the strong side of the formation is. Whether I declare it with a right or a left in the call, or I declare it with a tempo word that's already been built in, this set right here will always be this way. And a lot of times people ask me, they'll say, well, do you go NASCAR left? No. When I go into a tempo deal and I say NASCAR, I want all 11 players lined up like this without hesitation. I don't ever want them to think whether it's NASCAR right or NASCAR left. I want them in one spot because remember, this is a tempo deal. When I want to switch them, that's what I'll call Frisco right or Frisco left. So I can get into this set and flip some things around if I want to, but when I'm going high tempo and I want to push the pace, I want my kids with one clear thought. So when I go to NASCAR, that's the thought. You always stay on that side. Now, the beauty of it for me is I was also able to build in a 3x1 deal to go the other way. So, for me, and again, this is opposite for most people, but for me, when I go 3x1 like this, the strong side is actually the single side. So, when I go 3 by 1, my strong side declaration for my players is the single side. Now, if you're a defense looking at it, you're never going to assume that, or you're never going to call your strength to the single. The defense can still declare the strength of the formation to the trips. I'm not arguing that the strength of the formation is to the single. What I'm saying is that in my verbiage, I built a system to where my strong side is on the single side. Now, why did I do that, or how did I come up with that? Again, back when we were a tight end team and when I played in college with tight ends, the tight end always got the declaration. So, way back in the day, this formation used to be called Tex, and it meant trips to the X. So when we built that formation in with our offensive line, I had to let my strong side know that the strong side and the Y were going one way, and the quick side and the trips was going the other way. So in my original nomenclature, when I would teach this, I taught this as Tex left. So that the strong side people would go to the left, but the trips would go to the X, which was away. And when I taught it and I had my staff originally, it was not a problem for us. When new people come in, I'd be better off calling this formation left Tex so that they can see that and say, okay, the strength is left and the trips are going away on the other side. So sometimes I have to teach it a different way to people, but I always knew that formation to me as Tex left. It was trips to the X, and my Y always went to the declaration. So when we started going 3 by 1, when we were 10 personnel, we just kept the same nomenclature, all right, same verbiage. And what it did, when I started to build our tempo offense, what it did was, because my H was away from the strong side, I could now bring my H in here, and I could run these same plays with the same word that I called them in NASCAR. So what I ended up doing was I ended up building in power read, cue counter, and some jet sweep and play action stuff, and I never had to change the play call when I went from 2 by 2 to 3 by 1, and more importantly, if you notice the power read, all right, when I was in NASCAR, those plays were going to the right. All right, when I got into what we used to call Indy, those plays went to the left. And a lot of people will look at that and go, well, are they called different plays? No, they're not. It's the same word that we use. So the same word that I used for power read and cue counter was the same word that I used in NASCAR and Indy. And when you first teach that to people, a lot of times they go, wait a minute now, you don't have to say power read up, power read down, power read north, power read south. No, I don't, because the power read always goes strong and the cue counter always goes weak or quick. So it's built into my formations to do it that way. So now when I build it into the formations, even though this is 3 by 1, because of where my strength in my nomenclature, I don't care about what the defense considers the strength. In my nomenclature and verbiage, the strength of my stuff is here. So when this guy comes back in motion, he's away from the strength, going in motion towards the strength. We're running the same exact plays. And that's how we used to be able to play at a faster tempo, was the power read play was called the same thing with the H involved, and I never had to tag H fly, H jet, H zoom, H hack, H whatever the motion is. I never had to tag any of that and build any of that in because it was already built into the play. So that when I said, hey, NASCAR power read, they knew which way to go. When I said Indy power read, they knew which way to go. The H was always going to motion in towards the ball on power read. So that didn't change for him. He didn't have to know, coach, you want me to motion right or left? Just motion in towards the ball. You can't get a mesh with the quarterback unless you motion towards the ball. So the H knew on those plays that he had to motion in towards the ball. And then my lineman knew, if it was power read, my strong side guys knew that they were going to be down gap. You can't down gap outside. So I didn't have to tell them whether to down gap right or down gap left. They knew how to down gap. What side are you on? My weak side or quick side guard knew to pull. Coach, am I pulling right or am I pulling left? Well, you're always going to pull across the center on power. You're never going to pull away from them, so why do I have to tell you which way to pull? You know where you're lined up. You know where the center is. You know where to pull, so I don't have to tell him to pull right or left. He should know. And then the backside was always just hinged, so it didn't really matter there. And the center knew to always block back for the weak guard that was pulling. So the center maybe had the most thinking of all because he had to know who the strong guard was and who the quick guard was to block back. But the center also knew that when in this formation, the center knew that the strength was left. Otherwise, we'd never line up. When I first put this system in, some of the guys I was working with they'd say, well, coach, how are they going to know where to line up? I said, well, if I called this formation text left, how did they line up? All right, well, you told them. So I said, okay, if this formation, when I want to go up tempo, if I say that text left equals Indy, or Indy equals text left, how are they going to line up? When I say Indy, get lined up in text left. Once you get lined up in text left, why do I have to give you a direction? You're already lined up. I don't have to tell the strong tackle and strong guard which way the power play is going. The power play is always coming to you. You always down gap it. So when we built our formations, that's how we built certain things into those formations. And then I always had to be cautious when I was building formations or adding formations. I always had to be cautious that I kept my strong side and my weak side linemen where I wanted them so that I could run certain things within my terminology. Now, what ends up happening is you get into certain sets and you say, well, I can't run power that way because I don't run power weak or I don't run power to the quick side. Okay, so you sacrifice one play to do several other things faster, quicker, or with less verbiage. You sacrifice a play here or there. I can't run counter strong. I can't run power weak. So there are some things that I sacrifice, but when you're going to be a tempo team, every once in a while you've got to give and take a little bit and say, okay, well, in order to get really good at this, I've got to cut this out. So any good tempo people you talk to will always tell you that your playbook's going to shrink, and I mentioned that on every tempo video or any video we've ever talked about, playbook has to shrink. So what ended up happening was we can run power right, we can run power left. We can run counter right, we can run counter left. I just have to put the formations in that enable us to do that. What we can't do is we can't run power quick and we can't run counter strong. All right, so there's going to be some people who don't like, you know, the I guess you would call the rigid style or the unflexible style built into that of not being able to get into a certain set and be able to run power to the open side or to the quick side. Well, I choose not to do that. To me, power and counter are very similar plays. They're gap down with a kick out and a wrap. They're just different people doing different jobs with maybe a little bit different backfield action. So to me, I've got a strong side down kick play with a wrap, and I've got a weak side down kick play with a wrap. I feel like I've got the same plays. So there's other ways. If you kind of wrap your head around it a little bit different way and not get so fixated on power counter or whatever you want to call certain plays, there's plenty of ways to build it in. And then the job for you is to build it into your system. So that was always the job for me, was how can I build in what I want to do into my system? How do I build in the terminology into my system? And to me, it doesn't matter unless I get hired at a different school or unless I get hired in college or the NFL. It really doesn't matter what they call their things. If I'm going to look at anything at a clinic or any college film or NFL film, as long as I can figure out in my head what they're doing, now I've got to be able to put what they're doing into my verbiage. That's what football really is. Find what somebody else does and figure out a way to put it into your terminology so you can teach it to your kids. All right? And then we would always have balanced tempo deals. Like a lot of our three-back stuff was balanced, so you know, we would get into three-back, what I would call diamond, and I would bring the H and the Y in, and let's say the strong guard, and we would get into a set called diamond, and my players knew in diamond to always line up that way because it was a tempo set. So they always knew that the strong guard and the strong tackle went right, the Z went right, the X went left with the weak tackle and the weak guard, the H always went left, the Y went right, T was always in the pistol. So when I built that formation in, I said, look, let's just call it diamond. Let's always line up that way when we're in diamond. There's no need to say diamond right or diamond left. Let's just get into diamond because the nature of the set is balanced. So within the run game, I'm going to be able to do the same things over here that I can do over here. In the passing game, I'm going to be able to do the same things over here that I can do over there. So it's really irrelevant to have to worry about saying diamond right, diamond left. Could I if I wanted to? Sure I could. But I built this in as a tempo set. And I told my kids, listen, when we get into diamond, we're going to be snapping the ball as quick as possible and don't ever move. When you get into diamond, always go strong right, quick left, X left, Z right, Y, H, T. Everybody knows where to go in diamond. So when you're building your formations, it's up to you how you build them. It's up to you to build your own dictionary or thesaurus if you want, or definitions within your playbook. It doesn't really matter what you call things as long as you can teach it to the people that work for you and the kids that play for you. And as long as there's a rhyme or reason to doing it. So for me, there was always a rhyme or reason to how I was doing it. I'm going to move my strong and my quick side people. So I'm going to flop them around. The Y is always going to get the declaration and the strength. So the Y will always be to the strength of our formations with the strong side lineman. The Z is going to go to the strength probably 85% of the time. There's only a few sets where he goes away. The X is going to go away from the strength probably 95% of the time. There's maybe one or two things where he goes to them. And then you start to build your plays off of that. So then I built in power read and Q counter and jet sweeps. I built all those things into the formations that I had with terminology that was geared for my formations. All right, so when you get into building formations, what you got to understand is keep it consistent with your terminology, keep it consistent with your verbiage. Don't worry about what everybody else calls it, it's irrelevant. The only people that need to know what you call it are the people in your room, the people in your meeting room. Don't worry that someone else says that that's twins left when you say it's right twins. Who cares? That doesn't really matter. As long as you and your kids know why you call it a certain way, and then within your offense, as long as you build it around calling it that way, you won't have any issues. So formations can be a big deal for some people. A lot of people like to get crazy without formationing people. If that's your gig, so be it. Just keep some type of consistency in the teaching manner of your formation so your kids have some type of rule to go off of as a base, so that when you start to build more formations, they can go, okay, that's just that formation with me on the other side, or that's that formation flip, that's that formation switch. Just build in simple things that your kids can relate to and go, okay, I'm gonna get into that formation with a flip, and now it just puts me over here because coach made a flip call. So you can build multiple formations, you can build a lot of things in while keeping things consistent, and then build your playbook around how you build your formations. Don't build your playbook around what other people. You go to a clinic and you get a great idea from somebody and they call it zebra, and that doesn't fit in your terminology. Well, shoot, come up with a different word. It doesn't have to be zebra in your terminology. It can be whatever you want it to be. So build your formations according to your personal preference and how you want to do things, and then build your playbook and your terminology and verbiage around how you build your formations, and see if you can get yourself to be able to play at a quicker pace because you have simple declarations that tell your kids how to run certain things a certain way or how to line up a certain way in formations. Because at the end of the day, we want to be a tempo team. We want to eliminate verbiage. We want to cut down on terminology. Our playbook will shrink, but I'm fine with that. There's plenty of things. I still think there's way too much in my playbook, and there's other people that are worried about having to shrink their playbook when they become a tempo team. We still carry way too many things every year. I should just narrow it down to the things that we do really well out of formations and have an answer for everything and have plays that protect our plays, and we'd be fine. But as an offensive coach, you almost always end up, the good ones don't, but the bad ones and ones lower level guys like me, kind of sometimes you outthink yourself and you build too much in, and I'm guilty of that just like a lot of other people are. But don't be afraid with your playbook shrinking because we're trying to play faster. All right, remember, at the end of the day, that's the goal. You won't always play well until you can get your kids and your coaches to play fast. See you next time.